Hey everybody, welcome back to the Road to Mario Maker. Today we're taking a revisit to Super Mario World. Before we get started, I am using the Super Mario World redrawn hack, which gives us these lovely new, almost hand-drawn-esque graphics. We're currently using the Autumnal theme, since I am using a save file that has completed every single exit, just for exploration's sake. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about water levels and kind of designing one. A lot of people really dislike water levels, and I think that's fair considering they mostly act as kind of a break in the pace of the game to give you something a little bit slower in comparison to the really fast, energetic above water stages, the ground stages. And part of the reason that they feel so much more relaxed and slower is, obviously there is much reduced gravity and you can kind of jump forever. Really, it changes basically what you've been doing for the rest of the game. It's a very different skill set. But I think that also can introduce a lot of interesting wrinkles when used in appropriate ways. So a thing I particularly don't like much I don't like the water levels in Super Mario World, Super Mario Brothers much, because I feel like they are mostly just slower, more ponderous versions of kind of the same design sensibility that you would get in regular Super Mario Brothers. Most of the levels are, they're designed differently, but in feeling they're pretty much the same, but slower. Super Mario World is a little bit more exploratory, and because of the way its scrolling works and a bunch of other technical things, they let you get a little more maze-like or exploratory in certain areas, which I think is interesting. And another thing that they do is to keep the tension, since you don't have the high speed or the gravity pulling you down, the high speed running, that is, or the gravity pulling you down, they limit the space of where you're allowed to move and kind of dictate the rhythm of the game by adding obstacles that force you to stick in a place and then move with certain timing. And that actually gets pretty interesting, especially as some levels become easier when you do have a smaller hitbox, since you're having to navigate through so much more tight areas. Having the smaller hitbox actually helps in a lot of places, even if you don't have the safety of having the big mushroom. And the way I like to kind of think about these levels is kind of like very slow shoot 'em ups, or another fun way to think about them is kind of in the same way, with the same design sense and language that you would think about, I don't know, a Balloon Trip or Balloon Kid, and kind of the way those games have you kind of fight with gravity and navigate, try to sustain yourself in the air with with small little motions rather than grand ones. It's a lot of small adjustments here and there to kind of maintain yourself in your course, which is fun. I think these levels in Mario World is especially interesting when you go back to these stages with a Fire Flower, since they tend to use a lot of these cheap enemies that you can kind of plow through if you have a fire. So you can kind of see here they really dictate the rhythm and pace of this level by these torpedoes, and then occasionally you'll see these cheeps that disrupt your forward flow and kind of force you to sustain a certain position while under barrage of these missiles. And this one in particular, Soda Lake, forces you to duck down into little alcoves for safety, or even encourages you to go near the bottom, close to where you can fall out the stage and die, and really kind of skirts you against the edge of it to keep that tension, which is pretty interesting. Most of the time you're not in any real danger, but you feel like if you mistime your rhythms, you can actually get yourself killed pretty fast. Another interesting one, I think, that really demonstrates the way they limit your space is this fortress. So this one is cool because it's got these big spike balls here that move around, and it's actually a lot safer to go past them by getting close to the danger. You have to intentionally go next to the chain, which makes you invincible. Rather, you can't get hit by the chain when you're right close to it, but it makes it feel dangerous, even if like the danger is relatively short. Same deal here. There's another part where they kind of control your space here by having this little alcove, but instead of the alcove being safe, it's lined with spikes. And then these, I'm not sure what the dry bone fishes are called, but these immortal fishes are kind of here. These are actually interesting in comparison to the use of dry bones here is interesting in comparison to the usual water levels, since they can't be killed, and the ones that can be killed, these dry bones and those little spiky fellows down there, they resurrect after a little bit of time, so you never really get the relief of feeling completely safe. You only get like kind of that temporary reprieve, which is interesting since they kind of keep that tension up the whole time using torpedoes in Soda Lake, where here they regulate it instead with the threat of the undead enemies. And then here, going back here again, just to see, those waves, the real use of the forward movement of fishes and waves of fishes is kind of, like I was saying, a little bit similar to something you would see in like a scrolling shoot 'em up. It kind of restricts your space in a little bit, and I have to kind of hold my position right here until they pass, or I can try to time it to knock these guys down when they're not attacking, to give myself a little bit more space to maneuver while I wait for those undead fishes to move. And then here, another way to kind of restrict and force you into its rhythm, so that it's pretty interesting. I'm going to play. I'm going to make some water levels. I might actually try to do some water levels in Mario Maker and kind of apply those principles. See what I can get out of there in the way to restrict movement. Even this boss kind of plays into the restriction of movement a little bit with these destroyed bridges and stuff. Not quite in the same interesting way. It would have been interesting to have them actually have a water boss instead of another lava boss. But I think it's still pretty cool. And I just kind of love that they're named Reznor. I don't remember if that's the case in the Japanese version, but it's a fun little Nine Inch Nails reference, which feels really tonally weird in a Mario game. This last level here, I don't like this one as much as Soda Lake and the castle, but this one's fun. In sensibility, I think this one is a little bit closer to something you would see in like a Kirby's Dream Land level. I'm reminded of some specific stages from Kirby's Dream Land 3. Here they are using, once again, like in Soda Lake, they use they tempt you into danger using little alcoves that are filled with bonuses. That's, just a general Mario thing. They tempt you into the difficult ones, but here the tension comes from, you move a little bit slower. So you're kind of holding the area for a while, as opposed to kind of other special those extra goals in other stages where you kind of just make a tricky jump and then you kind of get out of there. There's more of a sustained tension in the rhythms here. These parts here a little bit more once we get to. So here again, another alcove. They restrict your rhythm by having them move up and down. Those can be a spike wall or a pillar of flame in other stages, anything like that. And then the important part is to time them with those waves of fishes. This part in particular is pretty interesting. You see some of these like spike style enemies in like a Zelda game, but also in Kirby, where they'll kind of rotate around a platform, so then your pace is kind of dictated by following them and trying to stay close but not too close. Again, the water levels here are about really restricted movement and really sustained tension. So one jump is basically, I can be on the top or I can be on the bottom here. Got very fine, I need to do very fine movements to get out of here. And then there's almost like a stealth element to this part with these sleeping fishes, since they will kind of chase you and kind of make it inconvenient. Usually you can kind of move at your own pace with those spikes that you saw earlier, the kind of pufferfish, but these force you to change your trajectory a little bit to move around, which I think is really fun. A good thing to think about when when building a water level, trying to set and dictate a pace, and then disrupt it using waves of enemies or ones that chase you. So obviously in Mario Maker, I don't think they have the torpedoes, so you won't kind of have that fun tool to work with, but you can kind of do the same thing with just regular bullet bills underwater. The last level we're going to look at, actually, I said the other one was the last one, but I think this is a good level to look at too. This is one of the most unique kind of one-off designs here. It has a very Ghost House vibe, straight for the music and the backgrounds. The spaces here are a little, broken up. Like you can see there's like weird little not alcoves, but little spaces that kind of go nowhere, but have this effect of kind of stabbing into what are usually a little bit either organic or more structured, like blocky stages. In other Mario games they would be, but you kind of get these pieces kind of jutting into your space with very straight pieces. Oof, this one's gonna be hard. I'm not actually sure if I can beat this, which kind of like disrupts the cleanness of the space. Again, with regards to the idea of sustained tension in underwater stages, here you're trying to hold your position, but you don't know when the ghosts here kind of pop in randomly, so you don't know where they're going to show up next. They usually won't show up right on top of you, so it's more about being a I'm getting really stressed out here. Sustaining your spot and then observing and then moving to the next one. And then again, there's those I don't know, dinosaur ghosts there, and that move in sine waves, kind of like the notorious Castlevania Medusa heads. Not as bad here since you don't have the limited movement of Castlevania. Okay, man, that's Get the... That guy scared the shit out of me when he made that face. And then again, that disrupts your hold position, right? You're holding when you feel a little comfortable with moving through that space. Then they fuck you up by having these enemies that either chase you or cut the weird sine wave pattern. The sine wave is a little bit more scary because it's moving up and down, and it kind of blocks off a larger area. You can kind of think of it as like 3 different spaces. That like a row of 3 enemies. It feels like you can slip by. They have the sine wave pattern gives you the feeling of like you can slip by it, but essentially it feels like treating it as 3 different enemies might as well be there. And then after the really tense, and this part's fun here. After that really tense section, you know, it drops you down into this pit where you're constantly falling, and then just straight up gives you a start to kind of give you the big release, which is really fun. I think that's one of the last water levels, if not the last water level, and I think that's a really fun way to build up those ideas of sustained tension and then finally give you that big cathartic push. Anyway, that's some analysis of some Mario levels. You know, the most famous and overdone form of game criticism on the internet. Just be happy I didn't do level 1-1 again. But yeah, I think if you think about water levels as kind of these sustained notes of tension and release, and you think of them sort of in ways like a shoot 'em up or like a specifically Balloon Trip kind of uses spaces, I think you can get a pretty interesting water level out of Mario. The trick is just really not to try to just make a Mario level but slow, right? Like a regular ground level but slow. Those will be things I'll probably try to think about a little bit more, especially when I want to use those on moving water levels and how they change. So I think that's probably some food for thought there. Anyway, hopefully you got a little something out of this, and until next